The incentives are pure.
Yes.
They want to buy good companies.
Right.
You own a good company. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end.
It's not venture capital, it's private equity. It's the Private Equity Fundcast. Pour yourself a drink and have a seat.
Hey, welcome back to the last in a series of 5 where me and my partners talked about how do you start a firm, how do you raise a fund, how do you buy a company, what do you do with a company when you're done with it, and now Ryan Milligan and I are going to tell you how to sell a company. So let's dump in.
All
Ryan,
right.
How do you sell a company? When do you sell a company?
Honestly, it's the hardest thing that we do because it's there's a lot of different variables, and it's the thing that we have the least amount of control over at the end of the day, because that's the one time we're trying to make a market, and in this case, somebody else has to make a market.
Yeah, so it's not always clear when to sell.
Correct.
So let's jump right into it. Like, when would be the reasons to sell a company? Obviously, like, it's worth a lot of money and somebody wants to pay us too much for it. That would be one obvious one. But like, what are the other things that go through your head? And when is the timing? Like, how long are we in this business?
So just talk about private equity in general. Private equity kind of works in 5-year increments, in my opinion. So there's always going to be this 5-year clock going off in people's heads. So that's like the center of gravity is around this 5-year time period. So company performance, you underwrote to a certain outcome, you've met or exceeded that outcome, you've done what you needed to do, you go to sell. That doesn't happen that often for it to be a perfect straight line, but it does happen.
You underwrote this deal for 5 years.
Yep.
Your model was 5 years long. You've achieved the goals, and now it's a natural time to sell.
Yep.
Sure, you could hold on to it for 5 more years, theoretically, if you made the investment early in the fund. You could sell it to yourself in a continuation vehicle. Maybe that's a little more common these days than not. But let's stick to the basic private equity stuff. You're here to hold it for 5 years. Some people would say 3 to 7. Let's pick in the middle. You're 5 years in. You've achieved your goals. Time to sell.
Time to sell.
All right.
Second one, I think, you have management teams. We're partners with managers. And there's a couple of reasons you would sell. One, managers are at a certain level of their career and they don't want to do this anymore. They've kind of done what they need to do. It was their last ride, that type of thing. You've got managers who just want a level of liquidity. It's partnerships. At some point, they want to put money in their own pocket and then maybe continue on. Maybe you've got a team. We're growing companies. You're doing a bunch of add-ons. Maybe you have a manager who is really good for A to B and likes to stay small, and now you're this big enterprise and they want to sell, and somebody else has a manager and they want to move on. But there's all kinds of management considerations that can necessitate a sale as well. The
business may have outgrown management's ability to execute it, right? It's a much bigger business, and to get to the next level, you need a new team. Now, that's a little tricky, but if you have a self-aware management team, that could be good. Management wants to get paid. They've had a really good outcome. They've had a really good execution plan. They've hit it. They're tired, and getting a little money in their pocket will recharge the batteries.
Yep.
And like you said, maybe the next wave isn't organic growth. It's now you got to do a bunch of add-ons.
Yep.
And we're out of money, right? We're in this deal for 5 years. We don't have a big war chest to do 5 more years of acquisitions. So it's time for us to get out of the deal so management can go execute the plan they need to execute with somebody with a bigger pile of capital.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What other reasons?
Market conditions. We had a time period where there was free money out there, 0% rates, and software got really hot. And in our particular case, in 2020, 2021 is a really good time to sell a software company. So sometimes it's a really good market, soft landing, easier to sell, and you just take advantage of it.
And LPs would say, we're paying you 2% a year to know when it's time to sell. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just take advantage of a hot market. It may be hot overall, like software was. There may be pockets of hot. What you do in healthcare services happens to be very attractive, and there's lots of inbound interest, right? So often that, like, is it time to sell? It's a hot market is, I think, largely driven by, wow, we're getting a lot of inbound interest from strategic buyers, other private equity firms that have a plan for what they want to do, and other bankers who are saying, like, hey, we've done a lot of deals in this space. You could probably get a lot more now than you could have gotten a few years ago. Maybe take advantage of it.
Yeah, people are raising larger and larger funds, and they needed to put money to work.
And sometimes in those cases, the private equity firm will say, we'll sell a majority to somebody else, and we'll hold back a piece. Which is more common now than it used to be when you and I started. When you sold, you kind of sold the whole thing.
Yep.
Now there's like the private equity firm will stay in a minority position.
Yeah, and it helps with the transition and know-how and just familiarity with the team and all that. So
totally.
Let's talk about the next one. Just fund timing. Like back to that 5-year time horizon. I mean, you raise it's a 10-year fund. You're deploying initially over the first 5 years, and at some point, LPs focus on DPI or returns, or they want their money back. That's kind of the natural cycle of things. So at some point, you don't want to play on forever. People do expect this to be liquid at some point. It's an illiquid asset class, except we are in control of liquidity, and at some point, you do need to pull that trigger.
Yeah, I don't think most GPs wouldn't admit, hey, we sold this because we want to go raise a fund. But if you're LPs, you have zero DPI, or you could generate a lot of liquidity for your LPs ahead of a fundraise, why wouldn't you? That's what we're in the business for. We buy, we improve, we sell. And you have to get to the sell part. Now, I know there's a lot of constipation currently in the private equity market and a lot of illiquidity. That the secondary market has come and cleaned up. But traditionally, you can't hold on to these things forever. You shouldn't hold on to these things forever, and your LPs need liquidity. And that's a measure of if you're ready to raise the next fund. Can you sell these? Even if they're doing phenomenally, performing really well. Say, hey, look at these companies. They're worth so much more than they used to be.
Yep.
As an LP in a fund, I would want to say like, okay, well, show me that your marks are real. Show me that you can take this to market and get an exit and have a good buyer. And that's a huge validation of how good you are at your job. Is if a good buyer buys your business at a good price, I think that's validation of they built a good company.
Yep.
Versus you just saying, look at how well it's doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think those are the major reasons. Only other thing I was going to bring up is there can just be other ancillary external factors, particularly in software. There can be technological changes. Like AI right now is probably driving a lot of people's thinking. Also, private equity firms sell to other private equity firms. And there's a point, if you've done a bunch of add-ons, you're probably getting closer to being out of capital. So sometimes there's a nice kind of pecking order of small funds sell to medium funds. There's just this trend of consolidation. And at some point, a reset's needed, new debt, new equity, management gets re-upped. And that's why private equity does sell to private equity so much. Those are other factors that come to mind.
Well, you bring up a good point, because like your debt is going to be a 5-year agreement generally. So after 5 years, the lender is going to need to get paid back. And you may want to sell the business for that rather than recapitalize the debt. That could be a driving factor in it, that other people are like ready to get out.
Right.
If you've got minority investors, sometimes they have a redemption right. Hey, I can't be in this thing forever. After 5 or 6 years, I can force a sale in certain situations. So there's lots of potentially legal and contractual reasons why you need to seek an exit. So a few examples. We owned a company called World 50 a long time ago, and we had owned it for 5 years. We had accomplished the goals. We hired a banker. We took it to market. We got bids. We accepted one of the bids from another private equity firm, Pamlico, and they did a phenomenal job with the business as owners with the same management team. We had gotten interest from a strategic a year prior to that, and we went down the path without a banker, which we'll talk about in a second, and didn't like the outcome because we weren't ready. But then we got ready to get ready. At BizCom, fax software business we've talked a lot about, we were approached early in the investment by a strategic buyer that had a lot of industrial logic, as they say, to make the combination. We were set on a valuation or a return we need to make early in the investment. We only owned it for 2 years, but it was a opportunity we couldn't refuse in the management.
Yeah, we say sometimes a company gets bought, not sold. So,
true. So lots of reasons. As many reasons as there are companies.
That gets us through when. Let's talk about how. So how do you think about, do you need representation? Yeah,
this is the thing, right? So where we live in the market, we rarely buy companies that are represented by bankers. I think we're 8 for 8. 18 for 25, 17 for 25, something like that. So more of our investments that we buy as platforms don't have banker representation than do. We love bankers. We love talking to bankers. We love seeing deals from bankers, but our types of deals are often not represented, including add-ons. But we always hire a banker. Well, actually, I can't say that. We almost always hire a banker when we go to sell a business. Let's talk about the two different ways. So why would you not hire a banker?
If you're not hiring a banker, it's probably because it's falling in that category. The company's being bought, not sold. So If there's a buyer, it can be a financial or strategic, but there's somebody who either had a thesis in the space or has been tracking the space. They've been hounding the management team and they want to buy it, or there's a strategic that just comes in and says, we're aware of you and we want to buy you for one reason or another. It might, bankers do their own diligence. They do their own underwriting. They have to get up to speed. They have their own process that they go through. So it really just comes to me, it comes down to speed and complexity. Are you adding complexity or are you removing complexity by adding a banker? If you have time, which we'll get to, you hire a banker. But if you're being bought, we're deep on these companies. We've got our hands in them. We've got an operating team. We've got our associates. They're all over the numbers. So if it would slow you down to bring a banker in and get them up to speed because the timing is right and you want to strike, that's when I think you would not hire a banker. In most cases.
And that's often not, somebody called us, they're so interested in us, let's just jump into a process together and go. That conversation has happened over months or years.
Yeah.
So you've developed a familiarity with the interested buyer. You've developed a relationship with them. They know about the business. They can articulate their thesis for the business, and they're at least articulating a valuation at which you would likely transact in a one-off deal.
Yeah, and I think for us to allow that to happen, it's necessary for the buyer to have credibility. Ultimately, you hire a banker to tease out credibility, to create a market, to create a process. In that case, it could actually take some luster off the deal. So if somebody is credible and they want to move quickly, and you're like, we're going to hire a banker and shop you against a couple other groups, and they're at a good price, that's probably going to sour them on the opportunity a little bit. So, but if they don't have credibility, we've seen plenty times people say, we're thinking this price, and then they get under the covers and they come in like 60, 70% of that amount. They didn't have credibility. They were just kicking tires, or you weren't talking to the decision maker. So yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit more about why would you hire a banker?
Yeah, let me cover off one thing. I wouldn't hire a banker in a few scenarios if a few things were correct. One, the buyer was very credible, right? It's just got some schmo off the street. Highly credible private equity firm who could articulate a thesis they have for the business.
And they have a track record of doing this, right?
And we have a relationship with them and we trust them.
Yeah.
One. Two, I think our numbers are going to hold up in diligence. I think we'll diligence very well. Mm-hmm. So I'm not worried about getting exposed. So they heard the high level pitch. They think it's really pretty, but if they get under the covers, it's not going to turn out so well.
Yep.
Don't definitely hire a banker or wait. Don't go solo in that case. And three, if I am okay still owning it, if the deal fell apart, those would be the three.
Yep.
Right? So hey, if this doesn't close, sure, it's going to be a distraction. We'll keep it as minimal of a distraction as possible. And we'd be happy to own this if this deal fell apart. This is the BizCom story. We were approached very early in the investment by a strategic buyer, a very credible, well-backed, perfect combination on paper. We talked to them over multiple months. We shared our financials with them at a high level. They understood how the business was progressing. Mm-hmm. And we were early in the investment cycle. So if it did fall apart for whatever reason, we would have been fine owning the business. Would it have been a distraction? Yes. Was it a lot of work for Caroline and Nori on the team to do all the banking work to get them through the process? Absolutely. It was an absolute bear to do it because, again, we were early in the process and not everything was completely buttoned up. And I knew it would diligence well if we did our jobs. So that's why I wouldn't hire a banker.
Yep.
If you're long in the tooth late in an investment cycle and it's going to be a tough sell and you're not sure who's going to buy it, doing it on your own is a really dumb decision in my opinion.
Yep.
So, all right, I'll put that back on you. When do you hire a banker?
Yeah, if you have time and you want to get ready, if the actual buyer is not obvious, why not take the time and get some help? There's those processes if you're going to contact multiple buyers, there's just it comes down to preparation, organization, and project management at the end of the day, up to a point. So in those situations, you hire a banker, you get it's kind of the free look to get battle tested. They're going to diligence you. They're going to go through your numbers. They're going to hear your pitch. They're going to poke holes at it. They're going to cut data a bunch of different ways. That's just really good leverage for a team to help you get out there. And then also, again, at that point, you might stage strategic buyers ahead of financial buyers. And at the end of the day, that's a whole job in and of itself. Just, handling the communication and the outreach. And again, that gets to the project management side of things. So, I mean, in general, I think bankers justify their fees a couple ways. One, it's that organization and project management. Two, at the point of LOI, they're helping you make a choice: who's credible, who's done enough work, teasing that out, getting somebody to put their reputation on the line. And then three, most processes, at some point in diligence, there's a moment that something comes up, or working capital is tricky, or something needs to get done at the end, and they need to hold somebody's feet to the fire to get them to close. So there's kind of these moments along the way. Some are about the organization in the bank. Some are about the MD, who's going to have that really explicit conversation with the decision maker on the other side at some point. But if you have the time for those elements, it's definitely a gift to a seller to have help.
Totally agree. We at WorkWave, we hired a banker a year before we ever went to the process. Why was that? Well, we had done 6 acquisitions, including the platform. There was a lot to pull together. The data, the customer cube, right? The quality of revenue analysis. I mean, we're going way back, right? It was pretty manual back then. We had 6,000 customers, I believe, and there was 6 different products. So in getting that cube right, cross-sell, upsell, net retention, gross retention, what the white space was in the installed base, all the analyses that a very smart buyer is going to ask you right out of the gates. We needed time to get all that ready. We hired a firm to do a market study. We wanted to make sure we got that ready. So it was that get ready, and then run the management through their paces on the pitch to make sure it was good. And we thought there would be a wide dispersion of interest. Another reason to hire a banker, right?
Yep.
With BizCom, there was one obvious buyer. It was the right price. It was a great opportunity for both businesses. It made sense. There wasn't going to be a wide dispersion of bids on that deal at that time.
Yep.
Right. WorkWave, people could have bid very low because it was still 6 companies coming together. People could have bid very high because they were excited about the workforce management space and the things it could become. So we wanted to go to everybody. We went to probably 100 potential buyers, strategic and financial. We never could have done that on our own. And while we could have helped them get ready in that year, which we did, we couldn't have done it at the pace or the intensity that having an outside party do that. And we hired the guys at Ares Partners, David Jonkus and his team, and they did an excellent job. And they had a very good outcome for us because they were able to create competition. It's nice to have somebody alongside you giving you the answers to the test and testing your resolve around things. And I agree 100% with you. And why do you hire a banker? One, because you hire a banker like you hire a real estate agent, really. They've recently sold a business in your space at an attractive price, and they know who the buyers are, and they know how the buyers behave.
Yeah, and let me just hit one last on that, and then let's move on. We had a legal tech business, and it was a space that was consolidating rapidly. We had done 4 add-on acquisitions ourselves. All of the strategic buyers or private equity firms around us were doing their own roll-ups and acquisitions. So this whole consolidation trend was probably in the 3rd or 4th inning of consolidation. So everybody's feeling each other out. Everybody knows. We knew every buyer. I knew every CEO of every potential buyer in the space. So why would I need a banker? Because that's tricky. Everybody's trying to figure it out. Which pieces do they want to buy? Which one can they get at what price? Banker talks to all the strategics, figures out the right way to stage it and get the deal done at the end of the day. But that's when an industry banker just knows enough and can help you sort through all that and clear a market and get a deal done.
And you literally knew all the CEOs of all the other providers.
By name, and
like
had their cell phones, and I could text any of them.
Yeah, you were like literally having dinner with them and hanging out. You're like, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. We've got different pieces of the puzzle. Some of us are direct competitors. Some of us are complementary.
Yep.
And to have a banker who knew that space to say, hey, I'm deep.
Or just to separate. I had relationships with all these people. It's hard to put their feet to the fire when you already know them really well and you're kind of frenemies at the end of the day to some extent.
Yeah, and we've had plenty of bankers on the pod, and we'll have plenty of bankers on the pod later just to talk about this whole process. For me, if I had one reason to hire a banker, if I could, what's the one reason? And I tell CEOs this, say, how do I choose between these firms? They all seem great. I say, you want to hire the banker who's senior enough that 2 weeks before bids are due, they can call the MDs at the other private equity firms and say, don't get cute.
Yep.
This is going to trade. Don't
and
overthink.
They have to believe them. Yep.
Don't overthink this.
Yep.
Right? You need to be here to move forward. And then 2 weeks before close, when everybody's fighting about working capital and everything else, they call them up again and say, don't play any games here because the seller will walk away if you don't do
Yep.
this. And we've got people calling us who want to buy this thing if you guys balk.
Yep.
That's kind of what I'm looking for at the end.
Yep.
All right. So
Well, let's talk preparing to sell. So, and maybe this is a little more blocking and tackling. Maybe we can kind of go through this a little more quickly. But to me, at the end of the day, once you start getting bids, I mean, the whole point of this is once you start getting indications, once you start getting bids, as the seller, you want all your ducks in a row. You want to be able to move fast and you don't want surprises. So to me, that's what preparation is all about.
Yep.
So there's a list of things that you want, like ideally that you want to prepare. If you're far enough along in your investment, hopefully we talk a lot about sale readiness. So just always be ready to sell. But ultimately the amount of diligence needed is always more than you're totally ready for. But yeah, let's talk about what you need to have prepared to take a company to market.
All right. So this is like even before you've hired the banker, maybe you've even engaged them in getting ready to do it. So like I haven't launched the process yet. But yeah, I think if you're in software, it's the customer cube, the retention analysis, the quality of revenue. That is the big hairy document that shows every single customer, how long they've been customers, even ex-customers when they left, what products of yours they own, how much they pay for those things, whether they upsold, downsold, churned, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
I mean, if we just had that one clean document from a seller, we would probably know most of what we needed to know to price or assess the risk of the deal.
Yeah, ultimately the buyer has a few outputs that they want to see, and then they want to make sure that what went behind those outputs is credible. So to the extent you say, here, you're in good shape.
And there's signaling if you can't provide that, if you can't provide it in a clean kind of private equity grade format, or if what you provide leads to more questions than answers. That's a huge red flag. So do not, with banker or not banker, have a very clean customer cube to get started. And then what about a market study? Like you own the business, you probably did one before you bought it. Can't you just use the one you did 5 years ago and put that in the data room?
Yeah, again, at the end of the day, I think this, and I would put like customer calls and things like that in this, but if you're running a broader process, maybe there's a couple firms that have been in the space, they know it well, they've been talking to your CEO, they've been at all the trade shows, and they know it cold. So there'll be a few of those. There's going to be additional people in the process that aren't as up to speed. So they're kind of going down the road, learning as they go. So again, you don't want them to have, ultimately with a market study, you want them to see the world through your eyes, not be wondering or asking questions about, well, what's this provider do? Or what's this competitor do? Or how should I process this? So the market study is meant to kind of lay out the chessboard that informs your strategy and why the decisions you're making, the resources you're putting against a business are what they're doing. So the more you can just help them see the world through your eyes, through a market study, and just have more context, obviously the faster it'll go. Because again, you've been living this business for 5 years. You know everything. You know all the players. All those risks that they don't have as much context for feel big to them. You've been working through it for 3 years and been thinking about these things. So you want to get all those things on the table. Just help them see the world through your eyes, and then that can help speed things up as well. Yeah,
you may hire the same firm you hired when we bought the business to do a refresh of that analysis and say, hey, 5 years later, here's the opportunity that's left for the next 5 years.
Yep.
We've used a firm called IGS and others to do this. So they're calling customers, they're calling prospects, they're calling competitors, they're looking at users and how big the market is, how big the TAM is, the upside, the downside, the risks, the whole SWOT analysis for you.
Yep.
And I mean, at the end of the day, if you have a chance to work the refs, why wouldn't you work the refs? Hey guys, here's a clean customer cube.
Yep.
And here's the path to victory in the market. You don't need to do any of this work because we've done it for you. Now, most firms are going to go do their own work, but at least you can present it in the best light. And a good firm like IGS isn't going to give you a document that's not true because they have to stand behind it and validate it. They're going to have to in the process, probably take calls from potential buyers to walk through the analysis they did and actually stand behind the quality of the work.
Yep.
But being able to hand that to somebody is just like, hey, I've done the work for you. This is still an attractive opportunity. You should be confident and be aggressive here.
Yeah. And I think this line of work is merging more these days, particularly than others, with the next category, which is product diligence,
Totally.
which we've always done code reviews. We've always done quality of security reviews and everything like that. Now, the new element right now is AI.
Yeah.
That's going to be a new ground for that. That does, and AI, there's a technological component to it and there's a market component to it. We saw this in the early 2010s and mid 2010s. There were laggard industries like legal that are they going to accept cloud adoption because law firms are scared to let their information be in the cloud. Now, COVID blew that out of the water.
You remember those days when
market studies were focused on both the DevOps and just the cloud infrastructure, and when are they going, like, where are we on that pendulum? It's going to go to the cloud eventually, and where's it going to go? Now you're looking at products and you're saying, how much of this is it going to sustain? What's going to be eaten by AI? Or is AI going to be an enhancement, or et cetera? So particularly right now, I think product and market merge, but AI is obviously a category that we're talking about all the time. That's a whole new frontier for product diligence.
5 years ago, I would have said, well, if you feel good about the tech infrastructure, you probably don't need to do a code review or tech diligence prior to sale. Today, I would say absolutely 100% hire a firm like Code & Co. or somebody like that to come in and do the work that another private equity firm is going to do. Find where your exposure is, fix it before you take it to market. Jim was famous for saying a couple years ago that cyber diligence was the easiest way to kill a deal, because you've got investment committee members who aren't as technical as maybe the deal team, maybe not as connected to the investment as the deal team, and they're going to want to see, hey, what about cyber risk?
Mm-hmm.
What about this? And if the report comes back red, you've got exposure for cyber, the deal could be dead just on that, or the price gets hit pretty hard.
Yep.
AI is the new cyber. That's the next thing where, again, it's existential. So how does an investment committee get their head wrapped around AI is going to support this investment thesis or destroy this investment thesis? And your guess is as good as mine, given how fast these things are moving.
Yep.
But you better show up in a sale process with kind of AI readiness, AI defensibility, AI moats, and probably here's how we're using AI in the product and product development to show that we're a modern technology stack. It used to be like, were you waterfall or agile? Oh, they're still waterfall. They're not agile. That's a risk. Now it's, are they writing the code, or are agents writing the code? And again, it's either existential, deal doesn't close, or it hurts the price, or it could wildly enhance the price. So Jim is doing talks around the country right now to people about how am I going to go kill your deal in diligence, right?
Yep.
As Jim would be the guy to say, like, no, we're not touching this because of this vulnerability they have.
Yep.
What about management? How do you get management ready?
This is something we might address later, but just to make it as it warrants its own bullet on the page at the end of the day. But I think private equity can be notorious for leaving management till the end and having that be the thing that kind of gets jammed the last couple of weeks.
No, that would never happen.
There's a gravitational pull for that to just kind of happen because they have to get their own lawyers and they have to get their own representation. And it's just like, we'll figure that out later.
But we're partners with management.
Yeah,
Why
exactly.
would we ever jam them in the last 2 weeks of the deal?
Bring it up early. I just do not walk your CEO and the team into a process having them not understand, have the explicit conversation. Are you continuing on? What does that mean? That means they're going to want you, you're going to make some money here. They're going to want you to roll over. At the LOI stage, they're going to put a bid on a page. Are you going to ask for the management incentive program then, or are you going to wait till later? I would say get it on the table because that's part of the deal, and you don't want to have that become a cog on the wheel later. They're going to be asked to sign non-competes or restrictive covenants or things like that. So let's get deeper on it later, but make it a thing.
Dude, you and I
make it a thing early.
You and I are going to do an entire episode just on here's what CEOs and executive team members who own equity need to know heading into a process, and how do they protect themselves throughout it. So let's put that aside. So here's an example. Rick Noble, one of our great CEOs and a friend, now retired. When we brought him in to run one of our companies, he explicitly said, this is my last rodeo. So when we go to sell, I'm not going to stay around and I'm likely not going to roll over equity, given how illiquid and potentially risky it would be if he wasn't the CEO and had an illiquid position rolled over. So we knew that going in. It was obvious. We planned for it. We communicated that to potential buyers.
And you had thought through succession planning earlier in the investment, because now what allowed that to happen? You had the conversation.
Exactly. So, and telling potential buyers, hey, Rick will stick around for a transition.
Right.
He's an absolute prince of a guy. This will be the smoothest transition you'll ever see, which it was. Phenomenal guy.
Yep.
Did all the right things. But we never talked about it, and Rick sprung it at us right before or during a process. That's bad.
No, yes.
Or we had to then have the banker call the buyers, oh, hey, I've got some new information. Rick has decided he's going to retire. Like, that's potentially catastrophic for the deal. So have those tough conversations early. We're often having conversations with people working for other private equity firms, portfolio companies, saying like, hey, I'm about to go into a process, or I was just asked about my rollover. What do I do? And my response is, you haven't had this conversation with the chairman of the board or the private equity guy who owns you? He's like, no, it's never come up. And they've told me I need to roll 80%.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, well, let's talk about like what's too little, what's maybe too much. Roll 100% if you're a total believer, but like the requirement isn't you have to roll it all. There's a range of outcomes, all with signaling, all which you should have had conversations with not just your CEO, but the executive team. Because you may have a head of sales who's like, I don't want to roll over anything, and a CFO who's like, I want to roll it all. So not knowing that beforehand is just setting up danger and chaos in the middle of a process. Yep. So get your ducks in a row with management, have the hard conversations. It may be very easy conversations too, maybe fun conversations. So don't stuff it at the end.
Yep.
All right, can we skip the legal stuff for now?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes in the customer cube and otherwise. So
let's talk about. Save that for
so
Ryan
we're
Harris
now
or
prepared.
somebody.
Like, how do you launch a process? Yeah. And I think in general, there's a couple categories that I think drive these different approaches, which is strategic buyers versus financial buyers. Strategics can be very good people to sell businesses to. They obviously might have some synergies, which should allow them to pay more, and that can be a very good buyer when it lines up. But I think the downside of strategics are they take a little longer. It's not always clear how they make decisions. There's lots of different constituents in a strategic that are in meetings along the way. So those can take longer. And then
you hear about the big ones because they make the front page of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. Strategic buyers of private equity owned businesses in software, pretty rare these days. Because exactly what you said.
Well, it doesn't move the needle, right? I mean,
you have to be big enough to matter. You need to be exactly on their roadmap. Hey, 25 years ago, 30 years ago when I got started, we bought companies to get in the strategic's way.
Yeah.
Knowing that a strategic would say like, I have to have that. We basically were like outsourced innovation for large companies. Yep. Kind of the way like pharma and biotech had been for a long, long time, right? But now, you could you could convince a strategic to buy your business a long time ago. You can't do that anymore. You need to literally be number one on their hit list for them to even sign the NDA at this point. So like you got to go to strategics way sooner because the financials move so fast, and you might make perfect sense in your head. The industrial logic might be beautiful, but they don't even sign the NDA unless this is something they've already thought for a long, long time. So you're starting that strategic process maybe a couple years in advance.
Yeah, it's really got to line up. And just some funny stories from the past. I mean, 15 years ago, I was in a process. There was a strategic that made a lot of sense, and they were engaged, and there was a champion at the strategic, and this was pre-Zoom. So, there was a Polycom, and you get on a conference call, and there was one call, I think we heard 34 beeps. Like, who's on this call? But there was legal, there was operations, there was supply chain, there was HR, and literally for 2 hours, it was like, okay, HR, what do you got? Like, tech, what do you got? Product, what do you got? Boom, 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 boom. And you're just like, who's in charge here? And the committee, that's death by committee at the end of the day. So it's like there weren't enough yeses out of that room, and it just kind of petered out, and you just lost sense of where it is. So It's just a very cumbersome decision-making process.
Even if they have a corporate development group that's been calling you since you bought the business, it's still hard to even get them to sign the NDA and then engage. And then it's a bit of a black box on how this goes. I would think going to a strategic in a process, less successful than a strategic coming to you outside of a process and saying, hey, we want to get this done.
Yep.
Right?
Makes sense.
All right. What about financial?
So yeah, why are financials good? I mean, for me, the simplest answer is there's reasonably centralized decision making. Like there's a board and there's probably a champion of the board who really makes the decision, is advocating for it at their firm and their investment committee. Beware of the investment committee, but for the most part, if the lead partner is talking, they're going to do the deal, they want to do the deal. Because we're built to buy companies. Like private equity is built to find companies. If they want to buy it, they try to buy it. And they do their diligence and they get it done as quickly as they can at the end of the day.
The incentives are pure.
Yes.
They want to buy good companies.
Right.
You own a good company. You know, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And where we live in the world, this lower end of the middle market, we've probably been talking to multiple strategic buyers or multiple financial buyers for almost the entire time we've owned the asset, because we're inventory for those guys. We are their inventory.
Yep.
You know, just like some founders are. But more likely, if you're a big fund, you're buying from smaller funds.
Yep.
Because they've professionalized it, they've taken the risk out of it. So you may have 100 potential financial buyers in a process of all different shapes and sizes and flavors. You might get 20 indications in an active process of people who are interested in acquiring the business. So what are the steps to do that? I learned this recently from Nico. There's FSCs and there's MPs.
Which is fireside chat.
I didn't know. I knew what a
And
fireside chat was, but I didn't know
Yeah.
they called them FSCs.
Yeah.
It takes it's just as long to say
And it's
FSC
so
as
clever.
fireside chat.
How'd they come up with that?
It doesn't save any time.
Right.
So fireside chat. What's a fireside chat? Feels like we're doing a fire. If we had a little fire here
exactly.
going, it would be nice. What is a fireside chat?
It's kind of warming up the market. It's just giving them an early look before it's ultimate. Let's work backwards.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what do you want? You want bids and you want an assessment of credibility. Like, okay, somebody put a number on a page. They at least took that step. It took them 30 minutes to take a form letter and put a number in it.
Yeah.
What have they done? What do they know? So fireside chats is kind of, it's two-sided. It's before really launching. It allows you to do some warm up of the market where a buyer is meeting with management and learning more about the business.
Are you sitting in a fireside chat as the investor in the business?
There might be different answers on this. I don't think so. I think it's kind of letting management manage that. At that point, that's management's job. If we're in the room, that's not a good.
Yeah, and we're not doing fireside chats without a banker, right? I mean,
right.
Meaning like this is now an intermediated process. We don't do fireside chats if we're selling a business on.
But it's really about pace. Like once the book is out, there's a pace.
Yes.
You want to drive that process to IOIs. Once there's IOIs, then you get to management presentations. There's a pace to that. You want to get them. You don't want that to string out over 6 weeks. Like you're trying to kind of jam those in over a couple weeks.
So you may take 5 or 10 fireside chats before you launch a process with management, CEO. Maybe it's just the CEO. Maybe it's the CEO and the CFO.
Yeah.
They're talking to whoever on the private equity team. I would think a couple people to several. They're doing it. I mean, they're calling fireside chats because they literally used to be in person, sitting in a room, meet at a hotel, get a conference room, and just like spend an hour or two.
Yeah.
Now it's probably a Zoom. It's like a quick hour.
Well, I think they're using their conferences to do this now too. So like the banker conferences and things like that. They'll even do. I've seen some where they actually do. There's a video. They'll do a pre-video that you're asked to watch beforehand to learn about the product.
Okay.
And you're basically committing that you have watched the video before you go meet with management.
And they know if you've watched the video or not because they can track it. All right. So you have to watch a video. Actually,
because then you're like, I've seen the product. So then you don't have a 25-year-old associate walking into a meeting being like, what do you do?
Gotcha. Okay.
So you're at least up to speed.
Good use of video.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So all right. So you maybe you get some little pre-read.
Yeah.
You get to sit down with the senior leadership of the team, probably the CEO, maybe the CEO and the CFO. You get to ask the questions you want to ask. You get a vibe for how this is. And then the banker says like, hold on a few weeks, maybe a month, we'll get back to you. And then they launch the process. And the people who came out of those fireside chats excited and amped up, a lot of it was confirmatory. I mean, I know some very direct, tough questions get asked in the fireside chat. So it's not just, you're not just sitting around drinking hot cocoa.
Right.
Because they're trying to decide, should we chase this or not? Because once this goes, we're going to have to move really fast.
Yeah, and I think it provides a spark. They know a book's coming, so if somebody really wants to buy it, they'll start doing their own work. And that allows a banker to, we're going to talk about deal stages next, but there's a pace to it. You don't want any of the stages to go on too long. So the firms that are really serious might do their own desktop research. They might even hire an IGS or somebody like that to go do some surveying of the market, or they'll do GLG calls or Coleman calls or expert calls, whatever expert network calls to get up to speed, so that when the book is published, okay, now they're ready to get whatever else they need to get done in their 2 or 3 weeks before they submit their IOI, and then your process has the right pace.
All right. And so you're going fireside chat, pre-launch, you launch, you're trying to get indications. We've talked about IOI versus LOI.
Yeah.
So you get some indication, hey, we've got a handful of people who are interested at the right price, right structure, they've done work, they get to meet management, full-blown management, spend a bunch of time, hire people, and go. So that's kind of how it works. And then you're trying to drive to LOI. You get to an LOI, and maybe there's few people at LOI stage, and then the decision there is, do you go all three to the end, or do you pick one and give them exclusivity? But maybe I just jumped ahead to deal stages. So
no, we should. I think that's I think that's what's next, and let's just hit it. But yeah, I see IOI and LOI as just different gates. It's just like check-in points along the way. So ultimately, what are you trying to do throughout the process? You're trying to get buyers up to speed where they're doing their work and learning, and they're firming up their bid. At points along the way, you actually need to make them write it down and commit to where they're at.
Because we'll all do as much work as we can until we're asked to put our feet to the fire.
But it's two-sided too. Even the buyer kind of wants that point, because it's like, where do I need to be?
Yeah.
Like, that banker, tell me, like, where's the market clearing? Is this going to be in a range that I'm excited about, or am I going to be on my tippy toes and I don't want to do any more work because I don't know if I can get there?
Because you may have a thesis in this space. You've done the fireside chat. You are amped up for this deal. You're very excited about it. This is right down the sweet spot. You've got capital to deploy. You've been tracking the deal for a long time. So like for you, you're like, just tell me where I need to be.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's kind of the IOI point. It's like at the IOI point, people have learned enough. They might have talked to management. They've definitely read the book. They know about the space. They get a bunch of bids. There's 20 bids. And then there's this football field chart that you've seen before. That's like, this is the range of outcomes. And it can be kind of wide. It can be wide. It can be tight. Who knows? But at that point, the banker will say, both sides get to learn, like, what's the range that this is going to trade? And then people can decide, do they want to commit time, money, resources to continue on?
And you may be the opposite of that buyer that I described and say, like, this looks really interesting. We've got money. It's kind of in a space we don't know very well, but the financials are attractive. And I liked my conversation with management. They need that time from launch to IOI to like get up to speed.
Yeah.
So you've got one group of buyers who are like, just tell me where I need to be.
Yep.
Right. And then another group of buyers is like, I'm not sure if I'm even interested.
Right.
So you've got to let that play out. IOI basically puts everybody on the same page. Okay, where are you at?
Yep.
Some people may overperform because they got really excited. Some people may underperform and say, like, you know what? Actually, I looked at it. I'm not as interested as I thought I was. So that IOI stage basically kind of culls the herd a little bit.
Yep.
And some people, well, you're trying to get a lot of people to drop out. Either they've really differentiated themselves on price, speed, certainty, all the goodies, impressing management, their plan for the business, or performed on like, yeah, I just can't get there. I'm here. We really love it, but at this price, and you just say like, I mean, we've bid on things where we've gotten the call from the banker and said like, you're literally half the price that gets to the next stage. We're like, half?
Say, good to know. Good luck.
Okay, thank you.
Should take that
Congratulations.
Right.
That's amazing.
Right.
Go for it.
Right.
All right, so then what happens next?
So LOI is the next gate. So
letter of intent.
Between which really our part of the market, LOI for other parts of them, like larger, they can run 3 parties after that. But at LOI, what you really want to do, particularly as smaller firms, is get exclusivity, because then you're going to really start committing resources. But between IOI and LOI, there's a data room, there's probably a management presentation, you're meeting management, you're doing your work.
And you probably haven't met management before the IOI. Maybe you got a fireside chat with them, but they're not giving 50 people pre-IOI a management meeting.
Probably not.
You're giving 10 to 12, maybe 15 people management time, a day, a dinner, all that, between IOI and LOI.
Yep.
Okay.
What you're really trying to do is the buyer. So what you're trying to get from a buyer, because we're talking about selling a company, is as much work done as possible for them to be as credible as possible, that when they submit an LOI, other than what you would call confirmatory diligence, they're going to be at that price. So they know enough that says, as long as everything that you've represented to me up to this point is true, I bid $100 million. I'm going to close on $100 million in 30 or 45 days. And I just need to do quality of earnings to check your numbers. I need to do my customer calls to make sure that's solid. I need to do my tech diligence to make sure you've said this is all in good shape.
And why do they still have to do all that work after the LOI? Like what's happened in the
Well,
process?
there's trust
to that
but
stage?
verify, but you're not going to let 8 groups do all that work. Is very, very burdensome on management's time as well, and it's very expensive on the buyer side. So the goal is this gets back. I mean, these all work together, right? If you've prepped, you've got good information that you feel good about, that they're going through to choose their bid, and then they get to double check. They get to double check everything under the covers, and it's beyond their competency to do that without experts. So they can't do the quality of earnings themselves. They need to use a third-party accounting firm. They can't do the code reviews themselves. They need to use a third-party firm, et cetera, for all of these things.
Yeah. And you may have provided all of that to them in the data room as part of this process, right? We just talked about how do you get ready to get ready. And they may say, some people may say, I'm good. The report on diligence, we're good. We don't need to do tech diligence anymore. Yep. We had our tech guy, do the work and talk to the provider, and we're good on that. I think a lot of people are going to double check their work, and they should after the LOI. And you're just going to get more intense analysis after that to feel confident. But we have seen people who have a very strong opinion, very strong conviction in a space will move very fast from LOI to close. And that's the certainty to close. It's like, hey, we've done all of the work you've allowed us to do and more. We are geeked up to buy this business. We don't need a lot of time from LOI to close. And that's kind of a differentiator in a
Well, and the reality is that's an execution competency that's become a differentiator for certain firms. But there's essentially a buyer doesn't want the LOI to close process to take a lot of time. How prepared you are, or how the nature of their firm or their third parties, you want it to go as quickly as possible at that point.
Yes.
Nobody wants that to die. So there are aligned incentives in that regard. And this is all, for the most part, if you're reputable. If this is the other reason to have a banker, is that really a firm signing an LOI is putting their reputation on the line. If you sign an LOI and there's not surprises, you should close at that number. If there's surprises, that's anybody's game.
All bets are off.
But you do want a banker to have stakes, because the buyer, they've got a reputation with you and they've got a reputation with that banker, and that spreads over time and people trade notes. So that does matter. But in general, that should tease out a firm that's saying, yeah, I'll sign this here, but I'm going to just change it later. A good process run well. Like you can
retrade.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Post LOI retrade. What? The world keeps spinning. Life goes on. But that banker has a very different opinion of that private equity firm.
And people will hear about that, and you're probably not going to get to do that many times.
You're probably not getting the next FSC if you do that from that banker. And for a lot of firms, that would be important. So again, I don't think a lot of firms sign LOIs with the intent to retrade the deal because it's a waste of money and a waste of time. But it does happen from time to time. And if your numbers fall apart in the middle of post LOI, that's on you. That's that's on them. And the buyer should change their mind if you don't deliver on it. What about exclusivity? Like exclusivity meaning at the LOI, we're moving forward with one party versus at the LOI stage, no. We still have a few people. Whoever gets there fastest, best wins. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think at the end of it, I think you see it more for larger deals. At the end of the day, it just comes. I mean, any process can go that way. As a seller, anybody would love that. It really comes down to the strength of your process and what a buyer is willing to do at the end of the day. But yeah, I think along the way, it's just really what you're saying is get your work done. Just do it. Get it done and you'll be fine. Get it done and you can close. You can. Yes, we've agreed on a price. First one, get your work done and you can do it. So there's other ways to do that, in that, like if you have prepared and you have a good process, people can do that in the pre-LOI stage. The reason buyers generally don't is that third parties cost money and it takes their time. So there's always this tension between those elements.
I'm taking the banker's advice on this a lot. Like, I'm not deciding as the seller, oh, no, we're not signing exclusivity.
Right.
Here we are. I'm sitting down with the bankers we chose and saying, like, hey, what should we do here?
Yep.
And I'm probably taking their advice.
Yep.
So, all right, how do we get it closed? We've signed the LOI. We'll go through we've done plenty of pods on diligence and how diligence goes and what to expect. And so let's skip that part. But like, what are the main things trying to get it closed? Like the things that stick out, like working capital.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, you've famously written a lot about working capital and how to negotiate it, and people should check that out.
Yeah, we'll do much. We can do a much deeper discussion on this another day. But I think at the end of the day, working capital. So on the balance, you're choosing. There's a peg, and you're choosing like based on where the actual working capital comes in. There's an adjustment to the price at the end of the day. This shouldn't be a big issue if you've agreed to all that methodology up front. Is the takeaway of that? But
meaning here, you tell people early on. Here's the format we're going to use.
Yeah, we're going to lay out the numbers this way. These are the accounts included. We're going to do a 12-month average.
Here's what we think the numbers are. Here's what you think the numbers are based on the quality of earnings work you did.
Right.
Let's input them in there, and let's find the place where you're not making money on the deal through this, and we're not making money on the deal through working capital. You're just getting enough of it to run the business the way the business should run.
Well, the reality is if you choose the peg right, nobody makes money or loses money. There's just either more AR or cash, and it's just honestly you come out the same, and that's a calculation.
So it's really a negotiation around like the
it's the definition and the methodology.
Definition, methodology, and then you argue on the peg. What is it? Right?
But if you agree on those, the peg is an output of those two things.
Great. Okay. So it should be super easy.
Should be. Now, I will say the accounting firms have gotten much more sophisticated in this regard. There's lots more definition. There's now an appendix definitional doc that's 12 pages long that talks about like what is AR, what's not AR, what's inventory, what's not inventory, how's deferred revenue treated, what's this, is there tax implications or not? So this has been complicated, which tends to happen as things mature and people create new products at the end of the day. So I try to avoid that. Us as buyers, we keep it simple.
Yeah.
As you get bigger, it gets more complicated, and you need your own advisors to go against their advisors and stuff like that. But anyway,
and companies in different industries have different working capital dynamics. So what works for software isn't going to work for
and there's
services.
seasonality, and some people don't understand that you're not really making money or losing money. But anyway, it's something that needs to be dealt with, and the banker should be helping you stay ahead of this so it doesn't become the last minute.
But 15, 20 years ago, it was the Wild West. If you could get away with stuff because people are unsophisticated. Sophisticated people could take advantage of unsophisticated people.
You'd be closing.
That doesn't happen as much.
You'd be
today.
clearing this in the last 24 hours of the deal and updating the funds flow and checking in at 3 a.m, and then the deal closes and it goes.
And the seller, if a founder be like, "Huh, what does this mean? I just lost $3 million," and you're like, "No, you didn't lose $3 million."
But them hearing about that the night before closing makes the closing call and the congratulations call right after a little different.
That is not good. That is not good. So clean it up early. All right, escrows.
Yeah, if you've got a clean company these days, they're much less than they used to be. There's also rep and warranty insurance these days that makes them less than they used to be. But escrows are out there, and particularly for surprises or things that come up in diligence, if it's a true risk, there's probably going to be an escrow that says if this comes up for a certain period of time or the statute of limitations, we're going to hold on to this money. So this can be 7 figures of. There's $2 million of exposure. We're going to put $2 million aside. That tax rule or that statute of limitations is up in 2 years, so you're going to have $2 million sitting aside for 2 years. So again, prep minimizes these things. Being sale ready along the way also helps minimize these things. A lot of times these come up because of like a bad contract or you don't understand a provision in a contract. There's lots, we could do a whole thing about just how do you manage your contracts and know what you've got, and that's just an operational competency that helps you run your business well and sell it well.
It could come up post LOI that something was found in diligence that you didn't know about, and they say, we need a special escrow for just this.
Yep.
For this period of time.
Yep.
That's not good. That's not great. It gets the deal done. Yep. You're not worried about it. They're more worried about it. You surprised them, so there needs to be a fix.
Yep.
So escrows can be used for like, hey, let's fix this surprise so we don't have to worry about it. Let's just get this deal done if I've got some safety over here.
Yep.
All right, what about reps and warranties real quick?
Yeah, just reps and warranties. That's again, it comes to preparedness, but you're representing that certain things in the business are true. You're putting together disclosure schedules, which is the backup for all of those claims that you're making. That's kind of the process where these things come to light. It's like, there's do you have most favored nation clauses in your contracts? And then you got to go through this one. Well, actually, our biggest customer is priced 30% higher than this customer, and they have an MFN clause. So actually, if this customer found out, their revenue would be down 30%. It's like, oh, well, that's a problem, right? Like these things just kind of come out of the woodwork. So yeah, every piece of paper or contract or employment agreement in your business is going to be attached to the document eventually, which is why start early, be sale ready, and just understand the paper you're signing along the way, because it's really hard to clean it up later.
Yeah, and we're going to have a whole episode on rep and warranty insurance, which is so exciting,
Right.
but become a real feature of deals and a real way to get deals done better, faster, cheaper that didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So we don't want to forget about management, but you and I have day jobs and we got to get to a couple calls.
Exactly.
So what if we just just walk through the highlights of the episode we'll do down the line about how to deal with management in a process.
Well, yeah,
when you're selling.
so what are the things? I think we actually hit this earlier, so let's just put a bow on it.
Let's do it.
Succession planning.
Talk about it early.
Yeah, talk about it early. Is succession planning. Who's going to be involved going forward?
Okay.
Are there people on the team who are limiting it, like they're reaching their ceiling, or they need to transition, or what it is? So it's just know who's in the business, and you're thinking in 5-year increments, like who's all in to do this for another 5 years.
Number 2, rollover.
Yeah, what are expectations? Like what's the market? And then based on the buyers, like what's the high end, what's the low end?
And by rollover, we mean how much is management required to reinvest in the new deal?
Yep.
Right. So what about restrictive covenants?
Yeah, they're going to have to sign non-competes. They're going to have to say, I won't hire my head of sales if I leave and go to work at another company. So in exchange for getting these many $1 million, you're going to sign up to not do certain things that would harm the business that you leave for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And don't surprise them at the end with it.
Right.
Understand, this is market, this isn't market. We will fight for you to get you a market deal, but we don't have control over it. And we can't force you.
But that just comes to, there's a balance, and we're representing investors, but I would just say in general, advocate for your management team throughout the process as a seller, which means get them their own counsel. And it's really, at the end of the day, the market's going to dictate some of these terms, but you can at least make sure these things come to light early enough in the process where management has time to do something about it before the inertia of this money waiting to be wired is weighing on their backs. That's not very nice to just be like, we can close once you're done with this restrictive covenant that you don't want to sign.
And
so let us know.
People will fill the information void, and they will
Right.
get paranoid if you don't talk to them about it.
Right.
All right. So how about advocating for management in a process? How do we as sellers advocate for management?
It's kind of like I just said, they give them time and have them understand what's coming, and give them an expert, which is a lawyer, to help them through it. So it's just be orderly about it. Don't let them get jammed. Bring it to light. Don't let a buyer wait.
And get as much of it in the LOI as you can.
Right.
If you have expectations for management, put it in the LOI.
Right.
Right. We expect a rollover of X. We expect Rick Noble to stay on as the CEO and reinvest this much of the deal. Right. Okay.
Yep.
Well, that would be a problem because we told you Rick's retiring. He's got books to write,
Yep.
which he has very
Right.
successfully.
Right.
So get that out early because, again, we've gotten calls at the last hour from other management teams of other companies we don't own saying hey, I heard you're the guy who could help me out with this. What should we do?
Yep.
We're like, that doesn't sound market. And they're telling you got 48 hours to decide. So that's not a great place to be.
Yep.
So, all right, that's the crash course in how to sell a company. We could do a podcast on each one of those points for an hour.
And probably will.
And we probably will. Bye for now.
From the heart of Chicago to all over the globe, a couple private equity geniuses, they share what they know. They love to mess with technology where the future is sink or swim. It's the Private Equity Funcast with Devin and Jim. Technology issues and middle market PE-backed companies, they bicker with each other and they don't take themselves too seriously. It's not venture capital, it's private equity. It's the Private Equity Funcast. Pour yourself a drink and have a